Yeah. No. So here are a couple examples. I put these up here, and let me explain one thing about this. There's a few people who got a little bit lower grade than what they might have hoped, and I'm going to give them a chance to try to get some of those points back. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. So here's a good example of context. For a lot of you, I have CON on top. Context, that's background. That's material that's not going to be in your body paragraph. I don't want you to explain the irreconcilables or reservationists in your opening paragraph. That is for your body. And so I stole one because I thought they did a very good job of kind of setting it up. They mentioned that, but then goes right on to good context, where they have everything from the War Guild Clause, League of Nations, Brest Litovsk, great background information, the events that led up to the treaty. That shows a series of events that you understand, and therefore you're showing off to me, the assessor, whoever it might be, that you know the material, and going through this led to this, led to this, and then talk about the treaty. Talk about the ratification battle. It's a very good job of doing this. And I like that. 14 points. You mentioned Central Powers and the Allies. I thought Brest Litovsk was a great point in here. And then the War Guild Clause. You have 3 good examples, facts of events that led up to it. I don't want you to explain reservations in the opening paragraph and then do it again in your second paragraph. It's not the opening paragraph. It's background to the events that led up to it. Things that are not in your opening paragraph. Just the same thing on the end, when you led to what came out of this. Yes, you want a quick kind of restate, show you address the thesis statement, but then what happened? Not once again, yes, and it was not passed. Well, thank you for repeating what you've already said in your essay. Talk about the United States became isolationist in the 30s. What about isolation? So that is context, that's background, that's great material. And if you don't have that, it makes for a relatively weak essay. It implies that you really don't know the events that are going on. You don't know the events that led up to it. And therefore, I'm already thinking, okay, they probably don't know what's going to happen. Also, it's one of the AP exam. Let's get the point. So that's the first thing. Next, the thesis statement. As I said before, you have to address both parts of it. I'll give you 2 examples. I'll give you 3 examples. I stole from 3 different students. Put them on there. Cut and paste. The beauties of cut and paste. Can I read that? Okay, is that too small? You're young and/or spry, right? You could read that. Despite the strength of the opposition, it was Wilson's stubbornness in the failure. Yeah, I copied this. Hey, that's one thing about timed essays. I liked what it said, but I left it up there the way it was typed. You're going to make little mistakes on that. Hopefully not a thesis statement like this one, but I still like the way they set it up. And I decided not to make the change. But the thing is, little mistakes like that, you're going to make. Little grammatical errors. All right, back to this. To ratify the treaty for your side because of the ability to understand the conservative opposition to the treaty and to work with more liberal reservationists in the Senate. And therefore address both liberal and conservative. It mentions the opposition and is involved Wilson. And you might notice on a lot of your essays, especially for that last sentence in a body paragraph, I'll have a letter R. R means relate. And if this thesis statement says it was Wilson's stubbornness, you must relate it back to Wilson's stubbornness. And so therefore, Wilson did not understand it, and so that stubbornness and realized he's going to have to make a deal. Something like that at the end of the body paragraph. Now, to the opposing forces, not Wilson's stubbornness, all made ratify the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, very good. And then we have a clear blueprint. Article X, first body paragraph, independence from the world. And that could also put out conservative view of the world. That is paragraph 2 here. Conservative opposition, first body paragraph. Liberal reservation is second. One more. And you need that blueprint. And that will be the topic sentence. Do not use a thesis state or a document in your topic. Many believe the treaty would never be ratified regardless of Wilson's influence, but the rejection of the treaty was driven by opposition, and then Wilson's stubbornness. As Wilson sometimes identified differently, reason agreements by the parties. Body paragraph 1. Wilson refused to address the limitation of treaty, paragraph 2. Which kind of a little bit of a contradiction, but I like the format. But that addresses the state, addresses it, and the big thing is you have to show that your thesis statement ties to the rest of your essay. That's where that A and B, that blueprint, on paragraph 1, 5 paragraph 2, that's your topic sentence. Now, most of that's pretty good, but if you didn't address both parts of the question, it can't do that. Even if I thought it was a good essay. And there's certain things I want you to do, but you know, almost all of you are going to take the AP exam. They want you to address all parts of that statement. Okay, so let me give you an example of a paragraph. Once again, I stole from 2 different people on this because I like the way they set it up, but it clearly laid it out. Remember, this is a timed essay. You don't have a lot of time to mess around. So that's why I give you this little formula. Once again, I stole this, but it worked really well. I have a lot of examples I've used in the past, but they're all handwritten. So I got a deal here. So here, that's topic, that is in the thesis statement, topic sentence. And then this is the important part that a lot of people forgot. You need a sentence or 2 to explain that topic, to explain the opposition, liberal and conservatives. Here, we have reservationists and irreconcilables, build the Constitution. It gives us 2-sentence explanation. You need that. You can't just immediately start writing the documents. You start the documents, and that is a red flag to the person grading that they're just going to be summarizing the documents. They don't really understand. Even if you do. Even if you do understand, if you don't type it down, there's no way, especially for somebody who doesn't know you, to understand that you actually understood the material. You have to explain what's in the topic. 1 or 2 sentences. Just like a short ID. Remember short ID. You start with an explanation. And then what are your examples? There comes your 2 documents. Here, this shows that conservative point of view. And then Doc 4 shows that you're irreconcilable with a very good half. Explains the fear of foreign entanglements. Mentions the constitutional belief that would violate the Constitution, and does a very good job with that. Very good half. I had a lot of very good ones, but I was trying to get like another good example. And so, topic set, explanation, examples. If you get one more good example from your outside information outside of it, here we have reservation. Yes, talk about that. Good example. You don't have a lot of time in the timed essay, so you need a formula. Need a formula. Explanation, examples, why it's important. That means relate it back to your thesis. And that's a big thing for R. If I put OI, that's outside information. Y'all, I'm always going to ask for more outside information, but overall, it was mostly A's and B's. Now, if you got below an 85, I'll give you the opportunity to do 1 body paragraph and your opening with context to get some of those parts fast. I want a good body paragraph. If you have to see me on it, you have to see me, we'll talk about it because there was just some mistakes. I had people, they do 2 documents, they just got confused. Stuff happens. Get that squared away. And I had a few people use quotes. Use quotes. Copy. Anybody can copy. And so any of those people who have those CME or are below an 84, I'll give you a few of those points back. It's got to be in by Friday. You do it yourself. Get it in Friday. Sound good? But overall, I thought they were good. Most of the A's and B's. And the people who were below that, one big thing people didn't explain, if you got you're right, some patience. Issues in the vote. The Senate was divided. There was a few people who said like the irreconcilable party. Well, irreconcilable party. There were irreconcilables that were mostly Republicans, but a lot of Democrats too. Just little things like that. And liberal and conservative, it says in the statement, that's why I said it in class. So you have to have that. Now, I walk around with a grade. Sometimes my handwriting is a little bit scrawled. Oh, I gave you 15 points as long as you went through all the outline. We didn't get all that done. Didn't quite get it. All right, let's go take your notes out. A little bit of water. Good. I still got a couple. But Friday, I'm not gonna remind you again. Friday, you get it to me. And most of the things I saw were just minor little things. Liberals. More about liberal, explain it what it means.
Oh.
Liberal, that's what it means. Liberal conservative, yeah. Oh, you don't mention anything about the vote? You don't mention liberal conservative. Yeah, it's. Okay.
They're tight.
Really good. I decided not to make a copy of it. It's on, there's extra credit movie assignment, it's on P. With the very clever name of extra credit movie assignment. So just check that. It's a list of movies like we did over Christmas break. There's a lot of really good ones. If it's rated R, please. You gotta get a big parent signature. Like I have Schindler's List on there and it's rated R. You need a, I don't care how old you are, doesn't matter, it's a school function. All right. So did we get to,
Which are,
oh, so we got the election. And this is the worst winter, partially because the president was elected in November. This was the last inauguration that would take place in March. Remember, the same thing happened to Lincoln. Lincoln was elected in November and the country fell into civil war while he was president-elect. And that's almost what happened here. The country began to fall apart and it looked like revolution. It looked like it was over. It was partially because, for example, the River Rouge factory, the largest factory in the world at that time, made Model A Fords. And in 1931, Henry Ford shut it down because no one's buying cars. And that, you can understand the logic to it. He had plenty of money. He just gave his son Edsel $1 million in gold. He had plenty of money. But if no one's buying the car, why run the factory? But you can imagine what happened to the last 3,000 workers who worked there. They are now starving and destitute and terrified. They marched on the River Rouge factory and police and boards, he had a bunch of essentially thugs and a guy named Barry Palmer, opened fire and killed 2,000. Killed or wounded 2,000 workers. Just marched on it because they wanted their jobs back. And Ford also said, why don't you just go look for a job partner? No place is hiring. But that seemed to show a couple things. But first off, the uncaring of the very wealthy in the country. But it also showed a problem with trickle-down economics. The idea of trickle-down economics is the rich had more money. They would just build factories. Well, Henry Ford had money. But if no one's buying, why run the factories? The idea of trickle-down economics is that supply creates demand. Work on supply, the demand will take care of itself. And River Rouge seemed to show it was the opposite. Without demand, there's no supply. And then there was an absolute revolt on the farm. There was famine. It stretches across the South and the Plains, especially Arkansas, Oklahoma, into Kansas. Famine. And farmers were furious at the number of foreclosures. In Sioux City, Iowa, farmers overran the city government and basically opened up the banks forcibly and started ripping up mortgages and burning them so they would not lose their farms. And they made it very clear, if you don't do something about the farm crisis, there won't be another country. There were there were food riots in cities. It was unbelievable. The banks, this is the worst year for the banks. It took 2 years, but it was international too. 2 major banks in Britain and 1 major bank in Austria shut their doors. It looked like the entire financial system was collapsing. And Hoover ignored it. More importantly, Hoover tried everything he could. He would actually make it worse. I don't know why it's looking at this. Make it worse. Why did he make it worse? He wanted to hamstring Roosevelt. He said, Hoover said, well, in fact, said word to Roosevelt, who was president-elect. Remember, Roosevelt is sitting in Albany waiting to become president. And Hoover sent word to Roosevelt, I will work hard to stop the bank crisis. It was worse in the state of Michigan. I will do something to stop that bank crisis in Michigan. If you, he said this to Roosevelt, if you agree to do my policies, don't do what you wanted to do, because your active government will not work. You must stay on the gold standard. You have to no direct aid for anybody and continue austerity. You must agree to that, or you will take power when the country's falling apart. Now, Roosevelt, of course, refused this, and Hoover's going to spend the rest of his life claiming that Roosevelt refused to do anything for political gain. Hoover was shockingly dishonest for the next 40 years. But, oh, one more thing I didn't put down, and while it's all going on, there was an assassination attempt on Roosevelt. The only reason it failed is because the man he was 4'10", he couldn't see, so he stood up on a rickety folding chair. Roosevelt was in Miami, and he was at a dinner, and the folding chair began to collapse right when he opened fire. He ended up murdering the mayor of Miami, but not Roosevelt. I'm sorry, the mayor of Chicago, who was down there with him, but not Roosevelt. I don't think the country would have survived if Roosevelt would have been killed. I don't think it would have made it. It was that bad. Because it would have seemed like a coup by the very wealthy, and things just would have, who knows what would have happened. So, when Roosevelt was inaugurated, this wasn't just a casual event. When Roosevelt was inaugurated, people are listening to what he said. They had this like edge of, or looking over the edge of a precipice. We're about ready to go along. That was the feeling. Now, there's this video called The Great Depression. We don't have time to watch it, but we're going to watch one of those things. I like how they present Roosevelt. And they start talking about a couple scenes I like. They show one of the largest Hoovervilles in New York. But it shows, or it mentions Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia of New York. He was a New Deal Republican. And they mention him and they go back to Roosevelt. So I'm just warning you about that. So Roosevelt was waiting in the car, obviously, for Hoover to get in. Hoover didn't want to go. Hoover was convinced that Roosevelt would destroy the country and would be the worst president in American history, and it's all over. But they convinced him, you have to go. So he's mad. And they're driving to the Capitol, and that's where Roosevelt will be inaugurated or be sworn in. They gave us inaugural address. So Hoover sat down next to him, and Roosevelt, very charming, has this ability to talk to people like they've been best friends for life, and just be very disarming and bring people closer. So he had this skill. He just did it naturally. He didn't even think about it. Just started talking to Roosevelt or talking to Hoover, put his blanket over him because it was cold. And they started talking a little bit, and Hoover stared forward. And this is a story from Curtis Roosevelt, Roosevelt's son, sitting in the front seat. And Roosevelt said a couple other things, well, we did this, or, thank you for the tour and stuff. And Hoover didn't say anything. Roosevelt said one more thing, and all Hoover did is just kind of turn over to him and go, "Ah!" And that's all Hoover would say. And then for the rest of the time, Roosevelt just waved to the crowd like, all right, whatever, I was elected. So we'll get to this speech. Hoover will spend the rest of his life showing how it is to be a sore loser. And we're talking 40 years, 4 years. Did I not hit play? The people wanted to hear that. I mean, they actually, the cheering was deafening. Roosevelt got up there and said, I'm going to treat this like a real emergency. I'm not going to say, hey, it will solve yourself. It will solve it yourself. You lose your job, it'll correct. I don't care. He made it clear that I understand what's going on. And so Roosevelt, he had that gift. And remember the whole thing about loss of confidence and people the feeling of doom. He started his speech, and I'll read this very quickly because it's going to have one of the most famous sound bites in history. He understood the importance of grabbing people. The main copy of his speech, you can see all the different rough drafts around his library at Hyde Park, New York. It's pretty cool how it came up with this. But it also shows his kind of brilliance. And he wanted to show that, well, I'll say it, I will address them, the people, with a candor and decision with the present situation of our nation impels. This is preemptly the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing the condition of our country today. So we are in this together. I'm not going to lie to you. This great nation will endure as it has endured and will revive and will prosper. So the first thing, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Okay, you've probably heard that, nothing to fear but fear itself. But what he's talking about is this terror that people have towards the future, that the whole thing is falling apart. And he addressed it by saying, I understand your fears. I'm with you on this. I understand there's a real situation, but we will get out of this. And unjustified terror will bring us all down and lead to how people always react when they're scared, with emotion and rashness that could lead to revolution. He was not lying about this. He was making it clear. Great soundbite. And let me give you one more thing he said. He gave this speech. He understood we have enemies. And the reason why these companies or these factories shut their doors, why you're starving on farms in the most productive agricultural areas of the world, why this is happening, who are your enemies? It's not the working people. Where are we at here? And now I lost it. Just imagine I could find it. Okay, I lost my copy. I had to print another one. And I didn't underline it. And it's set up differently. You guys don't feel. Everyone act like this was planned. Oh my goodness.
It's just that anyone is just.
Sorry about this. I'm gonna have to redo this.
Who did that?
Okay, here we go. Let me. All right, here we go. All right. The money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple of our civilization. We may restore the temple to its ancient truths. The measure of that restoration lies into the extent which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort. He played out who the enemy was. The money changers, so he's really playing on the New Testament of the Christian Bible, when Jesus brought the money changers out of the temple, but he's talking about the bankers, the speculators. They're the ones who did it. They broke the rules while you played by the rules and worked hard. He gave the people their enemy. It was brilliant. It's not you. But it wasn't nativist. It wasn't, we'll find somebody who made the few immigrants, or he's not blaming, well, like a lot. Soon to be blaming Jews, for example, or blaming migrants or immigrants. No, he said it was greed. It was greed. That's what did it, pure greed, and we're going to get away from that. So immediately action took place. I do like that cover from New Yorker. Because Roosevelt very happy right there. So the first New Deal, there are going to be two parts today, the first New Deal, tomorrow the second New Deal. But the first New Deal, and it's going to be a wave of legislation. Roosevelt understood one thing very important. Those first few days the president is there, in fact, the first 100 days, there's a honeymoon period. Where normally the presidential approval rating is very high. Very high. And that's when you can get things done in Congress. As time goes by, people, either grow tired of it or things don't work. And he knew he had this limited window. He's going to take advantage of it. No president would do this better than Roosevelt except for one, and that'd be Lyndon Johnson, who would be John Kennedy's vice president. So they call the first 100 days. And they call it the alphabet soup of laws. They have all these acronyms and everything, like NRA, CCC, PWA, WPA, etc. 13 new laws will be created. And the whole goal was to try in experimentation. And much like the populists and the progressives, he wanted to save capitalism through regulation. Save it from itself by using some prescription outside of laissez-faire. And if we don't, he said, we'll either become socialist or communist, or become kind of this monopolistic authoritarian state, fascism. So we got fascism or socialism. And he called the middle of the road, emphasizing this liberty. The term from the 19th century would dub it liberal. But it's very much like the progressives and the populists. And this would be the beginning of the era of liberalism, but that would last until, you can see it beginning to fade very quickly in the late 1970s, but officially ending in 1981. To where it go back to trickle down the supply side, which we are still in. So, the age of liberalism. And there's Roosevelt remedies, and these are all the laws. Some worked, some didn't. One would be a terrible mistake. But the big thing is the banking crisis. And he's got to address that right now. So, there are a series of laws we must get. Now, I was just going to post it on Teams. I have a list of all the laws. I'm just going to make you a list. And then I remembered something. Last year, I did the same thing and posted it. But I made a copy of it. And I found a copy. Would you like a paper copy of the New Deal laws? Is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Do you want one?
Yes.
How does it feel to want something? And not it? Get used to it. No, here we go. No, since I made the extra copy, I was just going to put it up here on Teams. I thought you could look it up. And I thought, oh, I made a copy. So you obviously are not going to have to know every one. I mean, we can do that. Sister Zarnowski still does the old AP system. AP government thing of having all the alphabet soup of various laws and agencies that you identify them. We will have to do that in,
Someone did it by weight.
we have to do all the presidents, yes. But we'll do that, we do that in June. And you have to do all the presidents alphabetically by height in order for presidency. No, I'm tired. Yes, you have to know all the presidents, but that won't be till June. That'll be like the last week, that'll be kind of our last little bit of the test. And I throw that on your final grade. All right, so There are a number of laws. I'm gonna show a little bit of video clip. Yeah,
Same thing as here.
Huh?
Been something.
too late. There's a time limit. These are a few of the laws, and these are also on this sheet. Everything with the fireside chats. But the big thing is the banking crisis. If you have no idea what your money's gonna be worth, you can't plan for the future at all. And the financial system was in absolute free fall. And this is kind of worldwide. Every country dealt with it differently. So, we'll watch just a little bit of this video. So this is the emergency banking bill and the fireside chats. So they shut the banks down. The emergency banking bill. So they shut down every bank in the United States and they gave money, injected capital into the banks. Capital for banks is money. And so the banks would not collapse. And then they said, we're going to send inspectors out to look at the banks. And when the banks open in 4 days, we will only let the healthiest banks open up. So you don't have to worry about your deposits going away. Now, they didn't have inspectors. It was a lot of it was an illusion. Can they convince people that the banking system, therefore the financial system of the world, is safe? And then right after this, he went on break. And these were brilliant. His famous author. Caress. He talked to people like we're all together in this and we're equals. Brilliant. He didn't talk down. And doesn't the voice sound good on radio? Would that sound good? That's cool. So he made people believe he's solving the problem. We're gonna do it together. He did this after the bill. Okay. And here's the thing. It worked. It worked. And all of a sudden, overnight, we can get out of this. It's gonna be hard. 13 major bills. It didn't quite work this time. All the different letters. Yeah, that's what I'm so. And here's the first big one. I just like the clever. Young men were unemployed in droves. So they dressed them up in surplus army uniforms, World War I, and sent them out. So that's just a couple examples of it. So the CCC will go out. Have you been to Lewis Clark Caverns? That trail out there was done by the CCC. I was thinking about one, I like that area around the gates of the mountains and that area of the campground and that trail there at CCC. The CCC did so much in national parks. They said restoring, but really was making trails, making campsites, all over. Even though 250,000, it's not huge. It was like this jolt, like, okay, we can get other jobs going. Other ones, for example, FARA, this was a little bit of direct aid for people, direct money for organizations because there was starvation. Eleanor Roosevelt would be behind the scenes influence, brilliant person, but at a time where men who ran things. And she would also be a tireless fighter for equal rights. And lastly, the National Recovery Act, if you look down the chart, I think it's the seventh one, it was originally called the National Industrial Recovery Act, but that created an agency called the NRA. And the thought was, this is going to establish codes to organize all business, like the war industries born in World War I. It failed miserably. That was an experiment that failed. And then what we found unconstitutional, almost to a relief of Roosevelt. So everyone got that? That one failed, the NRA. So let's move to a few more laws we needed the first New Deal. I could go in more detail about the NRA, but it failed. But you ever wonder what the NRA was there? That's what it. The blue eagle was a symbol of companies that at least at first started. So a couple more you need to know. The AAA is also on that list. And this would pay farmers to not overproduce. So remember, farmers, prices were dropping because of overproduction. And it too would be found unconstitutional because it charged food processors for the tax. And it did though have an immediate effect. Here are farm foreclosures in 1930 or 32, and they dropped dramatically throughout the 1930s. And so this was an effort to do something about overproduction. Here's another one, the Tennessee Valley Authority. This was Roosevelt's probably his favorite, besides Social Security, all of his bills. If you go to the FDR Monument in Washington, D.C., which I think is just it's really a cool monument. But the Lincoln Memorial is great, the Jefferson Memorial is great, which will be built during Roosevelt's presidency. Lincoln's awesome, and the Washington Monument is really cool. FDR is great. There's a big section on the TVA. It would build dams and do flood control and irrigation throughout the Tennessee Valley, which means the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. All these red lines are dams, but also would set up hydroelectric power plants. And this would be the beginning of the process right down rural electrification to bring electricity to rural areas. Okay, there's a couple different laws. We just stick with the TVA for the one we need to know. But for example, being the New Deal, that power would come to half of Montana. Because no power companies would ever build a power plant in Montana for profit, because they wouldn't make any money. In fact, the only reason Montana is around because of the federal government. No state takes more federal money than Montana to this day. Because we're massive. Who's going to pay for all these roads? Next, the public works. And this was to provide jobs, build infrastructure. There were three relatively small programs, the CCC we've mentioned, and then the PWA and the CWA, Public Works Administration, Civil Works Administration. You're not going to need all the details. They are on this chart. But the big thing is this was an effort to build roads, bridges, parks, dams, like the Grand Coulee Dam being constructed right there, the biggest dam in the United States. They would also start working on Fort Peck, but that would be under the bigger program. We'll have to know the WPA. But they weren't quite big enough. But the idea was we're going to get people to work, build, put money out there, put purchasing power, demand in people's hands. Here's another one, the Glass-Steagall Act. The Glass-Steagall Act would be one of the most important laws in American history, most important law of the 20th century. It would be banking regulation. And one of the big things it would do is separate investment, Wall Street banks, from commercial. Your local banks where you get a car loan or house loan or put your deposit in. Banks were gambling their deposits on risky loans in the stock market. And so for the next 66 years, they'll separate investment banks. So commercial banking and investment banking will be heavily regulated and not near as dangerous. It will cut down on speculation, that dramatically cut down on speculation and lead banking to be a very safe business. Not only that, the bank panicked for a real issue of all the people running out and trying to get their deposits because they're worried the bank would shut their door. It would create the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. You ever see an ad for a bank? It will say, remember, FDIC. Or you walk into a bank, it has FDIC in it. Okay, banks will enter this. They agree to be regulated by the FDIC, but it is insurance on deposits. So if you have a deposit in the bank and the bank goes under, you still get, today it's up to about, let's see, so when by inflation, I think it's $265,000. Last year it's 250, we've had some inflation. The point is almost all deposits will be insured. Why is this a big deal? If you know your deposits are insured, you'll be less likely to have a bank panic. Without a doubt, the FDIC saved the worldwide financial system in 2000. If there would have been a financial panic and a run on the banks in 2008, since we only have mostly bank monopolies now, it would have been a worldwide disaster, incomprehensible, worse than the Great Depression. But the FDIC, I should say that the Trump administration is talking about it. They talked about, they call it the Mar-a-Lago Accord. And I don't know what's going on because I don't know if you've noticed he's kind of all over the place. He said about tariffs, and he's going back on tariffs, and he's more direct tariffs, and he's coming back. And they're also giving all our Defense Department information to people on text.
That's much as
I have no comment about that except for saying, fingers crossed. Okay, moving on. In 1999, all that stability by that banking system went in. Glass-Steagall was overturned. Why? Well, they said we don't need it anymore. Investment banks and commercial banks were unified. And how soon do you suppose it would take them to crash the banking system? Less than a decade. That's pretty impressive. Less than a decade to destroy the entire financial system. Okay, they kind of brought back a little bit of the regulations in what's called the Consumer Federal Finance Bureau. And that set up rules to kind of, and also look for bank fraud and credit card scams. But the Trump administration got rid of that. They closed the doors. And so right now we don't really have rules. In fact, a lot of the banks are like, we don't have rules. Really working on this. But I'm out. What could possibly happen? There's no historical evidence of anything bad happening with financial problems. Moving on. Okay, this is I'm just impressions. Impressions. The Securities and Exchange Commission would be created. This was 1934. They actually did an initial one in 33. So this isn't technically part of the first New Deal, but I put it in here. It regulated the stock market by demanding transparency. Companies 4 times a year must put out their real profits and losses. And so people can make, and therefore to avoid illegal stock watering, a bunch of different stock activities. And so that, but same deal, if the president is pro-regulatory of the stock market, they would be pretty tough. If the president is more pro-speculation, it would be pretty weak regulation. Next, they ended the gold standard. And so the Federal Reserve could inflate the currency. They call this fiat currency. That's what we're on now. That gives the Federal Reserve Bank a lot more power over the financial system. A lot of people believe gold is more stable because gold, you can grab it. No. If you're connected to something, if your currency is connected to something that your government, the central bank, can't control, your currency is going to be much more volatile because you can't control it. And so this would allow for everybody to inflate their currency, and every country that went off the gold standard had immediate economic benefit. With the line colors, that's where it shows each country went off the gold standard, and immediately their economy went up. France, for reasons that are very French, they refused to go off the gold standard, and their economy was stagnant all the way to the end of the decade. Yes, that will have great impact on their readiness, or their preparedness for World War II. We are not on the gold standard today, obviously. The other thing about that Mar-a-Lago Accord is to try to devalue the dollar. Like going default on loans. It's an interesting thing. All right. Tomorrow, we'll pick it up right there, do the second New Deal. I'll tell you a little bit about taxes. I'm looking, I think I have 14 multiple choice and like 16 matching. And then those the 4 short ideas I told you how we're gonna do.
What are short?
Really short ideas are something about. If it's 2 things on the depression or positive depression or the New Deal. And 2 things on either total war or recent US immigrant. You have to come up with.
Oh, here you're rare. On accident.
We would have been a lot better if Eisenhower would have told the Germans when D-Day.
Via group chat. I've been there. On. Via group chat. I keep saying things about like I never want to hear anything. She emails everything else.
Yeah.
But
But they are definitely circling the wagons.
no, that's what.
Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, your thing signed?
Yeah, but it's at. I'll take the last.
Get it to me tomorrow. Thank you. Andy, did you give me this?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, okay. I just can't remember.
No, I'm just, his last name is Sweeney.
It's fine, no, I just haven't looked at it. I was gonna look at him today.
No, it's.
Unless you want one, I can clean. We're behind my balls. I turned it into. Oh, you know,
It might have on notebook paper.
I remember I have it.
Okay,
And I even saw it, and I even looked at it. I just didn't do the grade.
okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna give you a 0 though for humiliating me if I didn't.
Oh my gosh.
No, you got it done. It's my fault.
Thank you.
I'll tell you again tomorrow too.
I love what I don't care.
So you chug copy.
Chip copies.
Here are your outlines and everything. You get your row. Yeah, I made that for everybody. Well, as I didn't make it, I was just gonna print you a copy and I forgot, oh, I printed. These are the short ones, give everyone one of these. Yeah. Give them their own.
No, you should mix it up. It's a big difference.
This is your own. Get over. You're in trouble again. You're safe from the about seconds. I could have got, I'll try this once. It's just on this. I'm running like, oh, Liam was skipping yesterday. Huh? Yeah. Yes. I haven't watched Supernatural. I was gonna make you a copy of this and I said, well, what, or then I remembered, oh, I made copies of this last year. I have copies. I want to give it to you.